it just goes to show that there's a lot of paths to get through this world, to get through this life of ours. There's no right or wrong way. There's your way, period. You should pursue your way and do what you need to do to make yourself happy and to have the experiences that you want.
I do have some memories early on where my parents were fighting over credit cards. I distinctly remember my dad cutting one up over a garbage can.
You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their current portfolio allocation. Now to your hosts, Clark Sheffield and Jace Mattinson.
What's going on, everybody? This is Clark with the Millionaires Unveiled podcast here with my co-host Jace, episode number 203. Jace, what's going on? How are you?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
Doing pretty well. We were talking this week about, and we in an interview we talked about inheritances. And I mean, we've had the conversation generational wealth, leaving an inheritance, passing kids down to your money, however you want to talk about it. We've had the conversation a few times. But if you had to sum it up from our millionaires' perspective and all the times that we've talked about it, what are most of our millionaires doing?
Yeah, so really it's interesting. Millionaires are really all over the board. There's all sorts of different philosophies around this subject. And I think it's going to get even more coverage in the media, and I think it'll be more and more of a discussion, especially as, we're staring into one of the largest wealth transfers that the world's ever seen, from the baby boomer generation down to their children. And it's something that I think was going to come up a lot, but we've seen some millionaires say, look, I'm not giving my kids anything. We've seen some millionaires say, hey, look, you're going to be involved in family planning and charitable giving, and you're going to be on a committee to decide that. We've seen some that kind of take a middle of the road approach where, hey, they may pay for college, but they're not going to pay for grad school. They're not going to pay for a first home, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's really been all over the board that we've seen.
Yeah, I agreed with you. And it's come up in the news recently several times. So I just kind of looked up a few articles before we started chatting here. So Daniel Craig, right, actor from James Bond, I guess, and Knives Out magazine. Knives Out movie. He says, isn't there an old adage that if you die a rich person, you failed? I think Andrew Carnegie gave away what in today's money would be about $11 billion. My philosophy is to get rid of it or give it away before you go. Then you've got Kevin O'Leary, Shark Tank, an investor. He writes, no free lunch. It's just the wrong thing to do. You curse a child when you de-risk their lives. That doesn't mean you can't help them. Then he talks about his mom. She hated entitlement. She thought if you made it so that kids didn't have to work, they wouldn't. And I think she's right. Many people today know examples of rich, spoiled children who don't care about pursuing a career and have no reason to do so because their life has been entirely de-risked. And then what's often the most talked about is Warren Buffett's quote. And he says in the shareholder letter, after much observation of super wealthy families, here's my recommendation. Leave the children enough so that they can do anything, but not enough that they can do nothing. So it's interesting, some of these bigger names, and then obviously there's the whole group with Bill Gates and others who have joined a pledge to give away most of their money, but pretty interesting. I mean, you're still probably getting a good chunk if you're getting enough money that you can do anything, right?
Yeah, I think the number they've thrown out is like 10 million. I don't know if I verified that or not, but I've just heard that a few different times. But begs the question, Clark, what are you going to do? Or have you even thought through that yet without kids?
Oh, I haven't thought through about it much. I don't think I'll leave a lot to them. I mean, but I don't know. I mean, you start thinking of alternatives. You're like, okay, I give it away or I donate it. I mean, you start thinking about where you want to donate it and the charities and what you really care about. I mean, that's probably a tough thing to do, especially for people like these guys that we just talked about who have so much money. Probably easier said than done.
No, I totally agree with you there. It probably is. And I've thought through this multiple times, and we'll see if that approach revolves at all a little bit over my lifetime. But who knows, right? I'm still pretty young. I definitely don't want to go into the government.
I think with a lot of agreed. I think with a lot of things, it ebbs and flows. I mean, what you're going to do or who you can help or the causes you care about. I mean, I think those are different. as you move on through life. Different things matter. You prioritize different things. So I think it can be a work in progress.
Yeah, the other question, not just with inheritance upon death, but how much do you help children, along the way on their journey, right? Like how much you pay? Do you pay for school? Do you help them start a business? Do you help them buy a first house? Do you help them set up a Roth, or do you not? I mean, those are all sorts of questions that are, much sooner in the journey. If you have the means to do so, do you do those things or do you not?
Yeah, how much? And our millionaires are all over the board on that. Some pay for college, some don't. Some pay half, some don't. Some encourage their kids to get a job in school, some don't. So yeah, that's all over the board. We've seen no similarity there on that concept, right?
Yeah, and same thing with like first car purchase too, right? Some are like, oh yeah, I'll buy one outright, but it's $5,000 car. Some say, hey, I'll pay half. Some say, I'll provide a car for you while you're here in my house, but when you go off on your own, it's up to you. So yeah, all over the board.
Yeah, agreed. So anyway, just interesting concept, something that we were thinking about this week. Last week, just as a quick summary, we had Henry. His net worth is over $2 million. We put 2, but it's over. Just a little heads up there. He's been an entrepreneur most of his life, invests in business and public equities, and has a little bit different of approach than most of the millionaires we've had on the show. This week, we have a really unique episode, our first father and son interview. So the father is a millionaire. The son's on his way to a millionaire. Net worths are 1.4 and around 300,000. So we had both of them on and kind of talk about their approaches with money, what they do, how they've worked together, how they talk about finance, just totally different, interesting perspectives. Also talk about teaching kids about money and passing along lessons to the next generation. So fun interview this week with Stu and Jimmy.
First, I want to start with Stu, the father. Do you want to just give us a little about your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah, I grew up in northern Utah. Worked my way through college, working full time and going to school part time. I've got a good background in materials engineering, and always been a little interested in the financial aspect of things and real estate and stuff like that. And just kind of done the typical married family, kid, career thing. I did get divorced after about 20 years of marriage, and a couple years after divorce, my kids lost their mom, and I ended up being a single father of a 16-year-old boy and a 13-year-old daughter to finish raising by myself. They're both out of the house, college graduates, good careers, goal-oriented, happy, well-rounded kids from what I can see. And now I'm just working away until I decide to retire, if I decide to retire.
Awesome. And what is your net worth today?
My net worth is probably about $1.3 million, $1.4 million, somewhere in there. Real estate values are a little subjective. You don't know until you sell and stuff. So that's just an estimate, somewhere in the ballpark, $1.3 million.
Okay. And how is that broken up?
I have about 13 or 14% in a Roth IRA, about 27% in other retirement accounts, and then about 55% in real estate holdings, and then about 5% in a bunch of little stuff, personal loans, annuities, pensions, cash, precious metals, crypto, toys, bank accounts.
Awesome. And in the money that you have invested in the market, is that in bonds, stocks? What's the breakup roughly there?
Primarily in stocks. I'm a fairly aggressive investor. I have typically managed my own retirement account, but it got to a point where it's worth over $500,000 now between the Roth and the 401k and the 403bs and the IRAs, and the steps there's pre-tax and Roth. And it just I found that I just wasn't redistributing it, making sure that I wasn't tech heavy or tech light or whatnot. And so here a couple of years ago, I got a little lazy and hired a company to actively manage it for me. So I'm paying fees to do that. If I retire, I may pull out of that and do it myself again. But until then, I just assume somebody else that watches it more regularly than I was take care of it.
Yeah. So, you've shared quite a bit of your story, and I want to make this point. You've really built that up later in life and fairly quickly. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually. I always was working toward having a comfortable retirement and having a comfortable life, and being not living day to day, which I did for most of my marriage. And it was really a struggle in my marriage because my ex-wife had, very different goals, I guess is what you would call them, very different, attitude toward money and spending than I did. I like to save, she liked to spend. So, most of my 19, 20 year marriage was living paycheck to paycheck and taking care of, like short-term debt that we got involved with. It wasn't until, the divorce when I was in my early 40s that I was able to really do some things that met my goals.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. So, just for our listeners, I want to make a point here. One, it's never too late to start, right? And two, even if you do start late, you still have a long enough runway to get to some, where you've gotten a substantial net worth, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You just have to be diligent and take control of your finances and, basically save with a purpose. It definitely helps to have a partner that has the same goals as you. It definitely helps to work to improve your situation. And when I mean that, work to get an education to increase your earnings and your earning potential. I worked full time from the time I was 19 until now, with a small little 4-month pick up in 2012, 2013. I've worked full time, but working full time, it took me 10, 12 years to get my bachelor's degree, going to night school, and it was not fun, especially after the kids came. Once the kids came, I wanted to be anywhere but school. I wanted to be with the kids and not at school, and school was very difficult once the kids were around. But it took me, I think, 12 years after I graduated from high school to get my bachelor's degree.
Oh, we'll get into the kids too, because you mentioned Jimmy, and he's accomplished, and he's on with us here, so we'll get into that shortly. I just want to follow up a little bit on your story and talk back about where you learned to work. Right, you shared with us before the show that it was really on your grandparents' ranch. Right, that's how you learned to work. So, I guess my question is, talk about how that helped shape you, and how that experience working early on, and then we'll come back to Jimmy as well, how that helped shape how you raised your kids and teaching them the importance and the value of work.
Yeah, both my grandparents had ranches in the upper Bear River Valley near Evanston, Wyoming. And I spent a lot more time at my paternal grandparents' ranch, but I did spend time on both ranches. But, from the time I, basically 6th grade through even after high school, I spent all my summers, and even like winter break, Christmas break up on the ranch, and bucked a lot of hay, fixed a lot of fence, chased a lot of cattle, and there was just always something to do on the ranch. And usually hard work out in the mosquitoes and the weather, and sat on tractors hanging for days and days, and sat on horses pushing cattle up to the range for days. It's just a lot of hard work, and it's literally just watching my grandparents and my uncle and my dad on the ranch, and all the hard work that they did was just the example. I mean, everybody worked hard there. It was just expected. It wasn't that you were told to do the work. It was just that everybody was working hard. Even grandma had retired from from being a school teacher. She was in her 60s at the time I was up there. After she retired from school teaching, there was 10 acres of canvas dam ditch irrigating pasture right behind the farmhouse, and we'd be out working, and grandma would go change the canvas dams in those ditches. And if anybody knows how much work that is. For a 60-year-old woman or 60-year-old woman to go do it. It was hard for me to go do. And she was out there every day. She was responsible for, we'd do it if we were around the house. But when we were out chasing cows or in the field, grandma would be out there pulling canvas dams and resetting them. It's just how it is up there. It's just everybody had a lot of work to do, and nobody sat around.
Yeah. And it had an effect on you. And I just want to share, normally before we interview somebody, we send a generic list of questions just to get interviewees prepped a little bit in what we're going to ask and some of the direction we go. And then, of course, on the show, we discuss more intimately or more in a direction of the person's story and some of the things that stand out or may be unique. And so when we sent these interviews over, props to you, Stu. You said that you said, although your questions are great, I do not think they catch the life that I have had. And so I totally respect that, because I think both your upbringing, right, which we've talked about, working on the ranch, your marriage and raising the kids, and then turning it around from a young age, as Jace mentioned, is really amazing. As I read through and think about your story, it's an amazing success story, and it's touching for me to read and to think about the success you've had, and obviously with 2 great kids now and financially as well. So I just want to ask, as much as you're comfortable sharing here, about your dad, right? I think he had a big influence on you, and you watched him build up a business. And then what happened, as much as you're comfortable sharing here, what happened with that business as you watched him, and maybe some of the lessons learned from that?
Yeah, my dad is a mechanical engineer. He went to work for HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning company right out of college. And when I was growing up, he had worked himself up to vice president of that company. He once he got to that position, he kind of had some bad experiences with the owner and ended up leaving that company. And he was, from what I heard and what I saw and what I learned from some of his colleagues, he was very instrumental in the success of that business. And then he went to work for another company that was actually a couple other companies that had, but the last one he went to work for, it was really, really struggling. And the owner made him the shop manager, basically the business manager, shop manager. And, basically said, I'm going to retire in a few years. I want to sell this to you. Well, as Dad turned the business around and it became more and more successful, and he had to work less and less, and he got more and more money, he got younger and younger, and that date kept getting further and further out. And Dad just got tired of making money for other people, and he decided to go out in the business for himself. And there's a lot of capital investment with that kind of business, trucks and ladders and tools and equipment to build the sheet metal ductwork and whatnot, and facilities and buildings and employees. And he was building it. It was coming along. He had a bunch of successful contracts. He was making some money. And then, sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, within a series of just less than a year, just a matter of 6 or 8 months, he had 3 contractors that he had completed the work for and that they had been paid for his work to go bankrupt and left him and didn't pay him. He did not get paid for the work that he had already performed because of the bankruptcy that they'd filed. And it really, really put him in a cash flow bind. He had a chance to go and file bankruptcy and get out from underneath it, but he just had this attitude that he couldn't do to his suppliers and his colleagues that he'd been working with for years what the people that had gone bankrupt and left him high and dry had done to him. And so he fought and fought and fought, and he ended up in arrears with the union dues, losing all of his union employees. He ended up in arrears with the IRS on some of the taxes that he owed them. And there's no recovery from when you get in arrears on payroll taxes. You just don't recover. They add fees and interest on top of it that you just can't keep up. I mean, his initial debt of a few $1,000s ended up with him owing the IRS hundreds of $1,000s. And, he was pretty successful. He owned a ranch with his brother. He had a house, his business. He had some rental property. And he ended up losing it all, everything. He kept the business going, but he ended up losing everything. I saw some things that will shock you about how much power. I mean, he was making an effort to pay his bills and to make the debt right, and how much power and control the government has when they want to when one person make an example out of it.
Yeah. So how old were you when all this was going on? Is this stuff that you learned, is this information that you learned later down the road, or is this something that you knew at a younger age? Or is this something you were aware of?
I was a late teenager into he was fighting them through probably my junior high through high school, all the way through high school. And then, this battle went on for the rest of his life, basically. He just recently, there's some statute of limitations from the 80s, so a 30-year statute of limitations, and he just recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, realized that they can no longer seize your bank account, and he can have a bank account now. So it ruined him financially, and he's 80 years old and living on $1,200 a month Social Security.
After being a successful small business owner, right?
Yep.
Wow. Sorry to hear.
So it affected me. I know you get a lot of people on your podcast. I've listened to enough of them to know that there's a lot of small business owners that make a lot of money. In fact, that's probably one of the, and from what I've seen, is one of the most common ways to get in a position where I feel I am right now, is by being a small business owner. But it does not come without a lot of hard work and a lot of risk. Some people make it and some people don't. And it made me kind of very corporate. It made me appreciate my get up, go to work for somebody else, do what I can to make my life better, save as much as I can, and come home and do that and take care of my family. And to have the stability involved with a long-term career. I know there's a lot of people, there's a lot of risk takers, and in some ways I am a risk taker, but when it came to that, and there's some things that really aren't fun with that. I mean, when you get into corporate politics, I've been stuck in corporate politics. It just, when it becomes toxic, it just affects your life in a way, all the way across. And it's not hard for a job to become toxic, but I'm very lucky in the fact I've had a very interesting career. I mean, I've worked on some very interesting projects. Most of my career has been working with nuclear industry or nuclear industry materials and materials development. And I've really enjoyed the work that I've done in the career that I've had.
Good. Well, thanks for sharing. I mean, I respect your opinion and your candor, and thank you. I think it's important to paint both sides of the picture, right? I think everybody has a different experience, and oftentimes, and you see it a lot even with this 10-year bull market we're in, right? Everybody says, oh, it's always going to go up, or real estate, it's always just, a rental's easy. And I think there's people on the other side of everything that don't have that experience necessarily. So I appreciate you telling both sides of the story. So I asked you where you were, how old you were when your dad was going through this experience. So let's bring in Jimmy now. So Stu's the dad, Jimmy's the son here on the interview today. And Jimmy, I'm curious, we'll ask about you and your allocation right after this, but did you know growing up about your parents' situation, or tell us a little about how you grew up, how your dad taught you to work hard, what he taught you about money, and then we'll get into a little bit more details about you from there.
Okay. So quick overview of my story. First off, I'll start with my net worth is, it kind of depends on how you value, because my wife is a small business owner, and so with COVID, that kind of potentially has changed the multiples and how you value the business equity. But if you don't count the business, it's about $260K, And if you do count it, it could be somewhere between 300 or 350. So anyway, I'm in my late 20s, and I do have some memories early on where my parents were fighting over credit cards. I distinctly remember my dad cutting one up over a garbage can. And at the same time, I had so many Legos. I had all the toys I ever wanted. And actually, more than I wanted. I somewhat, from my childhood, even have an aversion to materialism to some degree. Anyway, I worked through high school part-time. I began investing in 2009. My dad pushed me to max out a Roth IRA with my part-time income. But, my mom passed away when I was 16. And when I turned 18, I did get some life insurance, and it was about $50K. And obviously that's a huge head start over my peers. But at the same time, I don't necessarily consider myself lucky. I don't think losing a parent is a trade, a very good trade for $50K. Right. Although in some instances, my mom made some things harder. It is what it is. But most kids, I think, would quickly burn through that. But I was able to maintain it. And I did do a 2-year service mission that I paid half of. My dad paid half. When I went to school, I decided to go into IT. And in the summer months, I actually got a door-to-door sales job. And my dad thought I was crazy, but it paid extremely well. I was, making over $50 an hour and about $10,000 a month. And I paid for my degree in 5 months of work. And over the course of 2 summers, I did 6 weeks one summer and 4 months the next summer. And that paid for my college. So, yeah, I did. I graduated in 2015 with a degree in computer information technology. Started out doing tech support, and I've since transitioned to become a data engineer. And over the last 5 years, I've job hopped to increase my pay 50%. Started out making about $60,000, and now I'm at $92,000. And
good for
the whole
you.
time, yeah, thank you. The whole time, my wife and I have been married, which is basically the same month that I graduated. We've tried really hard. We've generally saved about 40% of our pay. So almost, we get a paycheck. If we get a paycheck on the 15th, we use that to live off of, and the one at the end of the month, we pretty much just save it. And anyway, that's kind of my story. Also getting into real estate now, and hopefully we'll have my first rental rented out in January. But we will see how that goes.
Awesome, Jimmy. So let's get into your allocation. Just you mentioned getting a real estate rental here pretty soon, but what is the makeup of the 260 or 300, call it, with the business, or a little over that with the business? What's the makeup of all that?
Okay, so equity, I do count my home equity and the equity in my future rental property, and that's about $80,000. A lot of that is sweat equity in a recent home purchase. The home that we live in now, we plan to live in for a couple of years, so that if we wanted to sell, we could avoid capital gains tax, but it also would make a pretty good rental. Investments in the stock market make up about $175,000. I have 1% of my net worth in crypto, and I have about 3% in crowdfunded real estate, which I'd like to grow at some point. And then I keep about 8 to 10% in cash.
And do you plan to maintain that allocation going forward for the foreseeable future?
So I would like to increase my cash position. My loan to value right now on my properties is I only have 20% equity across both of my properties. I would like to own my rental outright. It's a small mortgage, so it wouldn't be that hard to do. And I'd like to get that loan to value closer to 50 or 40%. So I would like to increase my real estate allocation. I would like to increase my crowdfunded real estate as well. And also, I think I need to have bigger cash reserves as a landlord. And with COVID and all that, currently have maybe 6 months of cash. But if we had a vacancy, that would go much faster. So I think having closer to a year would be good. I'd really like to get to $50,000 in cash, but that's going to take a little while.
Jimmy, I want to ask, growing up and the things that you experienced and your dad, we've heard a little bit of both stories. What are some of the principles or lessons that you really took from your childhood or even now that your dad has taught you?
I have distinct memories of learning the rule of 72, which is basically how long it takes to double your money in investments. And there's a really easy way to remember it. And it's basically the numbers 8 and 9 are interchangeable. So if you earn 9% interest on a $100 investment, in 8 years, it will double to 200, and vice versa. If you earn 8%, it'll double in about 9 years. So that's a simplified, easy math of the rule of 72. And so I often think, if I'm in my late 20s now, every dollar I have, if there's 30 or 40 years before I need that, if I can keep that invested, you double it. $1 goes to 2, to 4, to 8, to 16. Every dollar I have is $16 in the future. And so when I think about I'm going to buy a $10, cheeseburger, no, it's actually, or just a meal out, it's actually $160. So I often think about that heavily impacted me. And so I often, count the cost, the opportunity cost there.
And Stu, were there certain things that you wanted to instill in? Was teaching the rule of 72 something that you really wanted to make sure that Jimmy learned?
Absolutely. That's something that that I specifically remember showing both of my kids, probably multiple times. The other thing that I really wanted to, that really concerned me is you mentioned that he got about $50,000 handed to him when he was 18 years old. I think about what would have happened to me if somebody would have handed me a comparable amount of money when I was 18. Or if you look at a lot of, almost anybody, you hand an 18-year-old kid money, especially one that's within a couple of years has been dealing with the death of a parent, without good basic foundations of how to use money and how to work with money and how to basically an understanding of budgets and money and how to deal with it. It was a huge concern for me to make sure that at 18, when that money from his mom's life insurance got handed to him, that both him and his sister were well prepared for it, and that it was going to be used in a responsible manner, and it would be appreciated for what it is, as their mom's legacy, so to speak, that it wouldn't just get squandered and wasted. And it was such a concern for me after the death of their mother, to prepare them. It went into a trust. I had no control over it.
Mm-hmm.
At 8, we're going to get it. I knew it. I think they knew it. Just the concern of how that can actually ruin somebody, and it really can if they're not somewhat stable and responsible and educated on, and not just educated, have a practical application of money and the value of money and how it works, what it's used for, and how it can benefit you. And just such a huge concern of mine when I realized that both my kids would just be handed this lump sum when they turned 18.
Yeah, totally. So Jimmy, do you talk money and strategy with your father now?
We do talk about money quite a bit. It used to be where I was always asking his advice, and it's actually kind of flipped the other way around, which is kind of funny. So,
does Stu? Do you agree with that? He's like, yeah, right, man.
I used to be the one that really paid attention to it, and now that I'm not going to say I'm on cruise control, but I'm comfortable, and I have somebody managing my assets, and my real estate holdings are doing well. I don't. What do you call it, Jimmy? Where you chase the pennies? I don't chase the pennies anymore, and he does. He is into it. He's got a blog that he's active on that he does. He knows the laws. He knows the rules. I go to him for advice now. Absolutely.
So, Jimmy, let me go back. Your dad said you got the $50,000, or you've talked about it, right, in life insurance after your mother passed away. And I know there was some work that went on behind that, right? Both from your dad and your perspective in the sense of budgeting that amount, helping you open a bank account, getting a debit card. What do you remember about that process, and what exactly did happen? Because I think it's so interesting, right? You don't hear about it often. And like you said earlier in the show, you wouldn't trade it, right? A loss of a parent for money, but it is what it is. It happened. You got the 50,000. And so how did you both work on that together? And what do you remember, Jimmy, about getting that set up and making sure you didn't spend it all or you spent it wisely?
I don't remember too much because, when a parent passes away, and I didn't even really realize this, but I think, you get some social security for the kids in many instances. And that was to help my dad, pay for my school and activities and whatnot. And my dad used some of that money. He gave some of that money to me for gas, and he didn't have to, but he did. But, at the same time, I was getting good grades. I was staying out of trouble, and I was also working part-time. So I had, $300 a week coming in high school that pretty much covered, whatever dates I wanted to go on. And I honestly don't remember a whole lot other than I would often buy lots of random things at Walmart and just, I never really bought anything expensive. I've always been one to look for a deal. So, I definitely enjoyed it a little bit, but I didn't really feel like I had anything to spend it on. I drove an old beat up pickup truck and just tried to keep that thing running and rode around on dirt bikes, and it was pretty simple. So, but I do remember when I graduated high school being kind of prodded and pushed to open a Roth, and I was kind of just resisting it. It took a few months, and now this was when I was graduating high school. It was 2009. So that was a good time to be investing. I wish I had listened, the summer before I went to my first semester of college. I probably dragged my feet on it for about 2 months, and so I didn't quite get the bottom of the market, but I was pretty close back in 2009. It was a good time to start investing.
Yeah, so Stu, let me ask you about the life insurance, because it's obviously something you hope you never have to use in a sense, but I know it played both a big part in you and Jimmy and your financial success, or getting that ball rolling a little bit right early on. What made you initially, I think there's a little backstory, right, to what made you initially get the life insurance, and maybe what would be your advice to somebody on when to get it and how much to get?
So the life insurance that Jimmy and his sister got was through his mother's employer, and it was a policy that she designated as the beneficiary to her, so to them. When both my kids were born in the early 90s, I was working a job that had really good employee life insurance and really good dependent life insurance. And I had enough interest in finances to read and to know that anybody with dependent children should have a life insurance policy roughly equal to 10 times their income. And that's just a general policy, general rule. Okay. And I had that through my employer, and I had it for my wife through the employer. Not only do working moms need life insurance, but stay-at-home moms need life insurance, because if you're a single parent and you're relying on that other parent, if you're a parent and you're relying on that other parent to help raise the kids, whether they're working or not, they're of substantial value to the marriage. So you need to be able to replace that if something happens. And the general rule is 10 times their income. If they're a working parent, mother or father, then that also needs to be considered, of what their value to the household is. And so I had the job. It had good dependent and employee life insurance. In the late 90s, I switched to a job that offered decent employee life insurance, but it was a minimum policy on dependents and my wife. So in the late 90s, she pretty much lost the life insurance that I had because I switched this job. And I went shopping for a 20-year term life policy, roughly equal to 10 times her policy. And I purchased that. And let's see, about 8 years later, we ended up getting a divorce. And during the divorce, I discussed with her. So I'm the policy holder, I'm the beneficiary, and the policy's on her. And I told her that I still need her. I mean, we discussed it in the divorce that we still need her value to raise the kids, and that I would keep the policy and keep it current on her. And so I did that after the divorce. And when she died a couple of years later, I also got a life insurance policy payout to help raise the kids. It's basically, and I just want to emphasize this to anybody that's listening, that has kids. It's good, solid, prudent financial planning to have life insurance on a parent if you have dependent children. And it needs to cover what the loss of that parent would be to raising them. And so I bought a 20-year term life policy on my wife when my kids were younger. And when she died, I got a payout on it as well. So the kids got a payout on her employee life insurance. And then I got a payout on this policy, which I used to basically provide the kids a nice, stable environment to be able to deal with and recover and be successful after their loss, the loss of their mother.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I want to read a couple of words that you wrote to us before, because I think it really hits home and reiterates the importance of this. You said, making the sound financial decision to ensure the life of the mother of my children 10 years earlier freed me of financial worries during the critical time we needed to deal with her loss as a family. It allowed me to provide a stable environment that allowed my children to not only deal with her death, but also to thrive. My priority was on my kids and me for the first few years after her death. It was only afterwards that I could see that we were going to be okay, that I refocused on my career and my finances. The life insurance allowed me to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, perfect. That's your word. So thanks for sharing. So let's shift gears here a little bit. Jimmy, I'm going to come back to you. So you shared with us, you paid half of the 2-year church service mission. I think you paid half of college growing up, right? What was the conversation with you and your dad and your mom also when growing up about what you had to pay for, and were you aware that you had to pay half, and did you have that in savings? Or I'm just curious on that dynamic, because I think parents with kids, you see it totally different ways, right? Some pay all of school, some pay none of school. If they want to do like a study abroad, that there's always like discussion on who pays for what and how much. So what was that dynamic like growing up, and the communication with your dad and others?
That's kind of a tough question. I don't remember a whole lot of that, but I did have the money from when I was 18, so I knew I could have paid everything if I had to. And yes, when I was going to school, basically as long as I was keeping in touch and doing a good job and working hard, then my dad paid my housing in college, and I took care of the tuition and most of the other expenses along with that. But yeah, as long as far as the mission goes, again, I think I could have paid it myself, but it was kind of the same deal where as long as I work hard and try my best, then he's willing to chip in as well.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable that just the journey that you two have been on, and what you've experienced to get to where you are now. I want to shift gears just a little bit. We've spent a lot of time talking about the past and how experiences have shaped the two of y'all and your interactions together, and the dynamic that's shifted from father teaching son to now son teaching father. Where, and Jimmy, I'll start with you, or maybe Stu actually, because you're kind of at a point where you say you're not watching the pennies as much anymore. Where do you go from here as it relates to finances and maybe instilling some additional lessons into your family or your family tree and things that you want for the generations that come after you?
Let me back up and comment on the question you just asked, Jimmy. With me helping with them, I wanted them to have a stake in what they were doing. And I basically worded it to him. I'm not sure if him or my daughter would know this or remember this, but but basically I wanted them to have a stake in what they were doing. I knew that they had money from their mom. I wanted their mom. So the way I saw it is that they had a choice. That money was from their mom, and they had a choice to use it how they wanted to. But if they were going to invest in their future, I was willing to match their investment. I was willing to match the investment that they were willing to do in their future. And that's how I looked at it. With their education, with his service mission, with my daughter's education. To me, it's an investment in their future. And if they're willing to invest in their future, I'm willing to help them. So going back to the question you just asked me, where do I go from here? Well, I enjoy my job. I'm very fortunate to have a job that I really do enjoy. And I make a decent salary doing it. And with COVID, I've kind of received the freedom to be able to do it from wherever I want. There's some limitations to that, but my short-term future is to continue to basically minimize my debt and reduce my cash flow need, because the properties that I have do have some cash flow needs. And if there's one thing that will get you in trouble that I saw from my dad and from some other examples is, and my son has mentioned it as well, is cash flow will get you in trouble faster than anything else. So when I get to a particular cash flow based on my rental income and my investment and just reducing my debt, then I'm going to cut back on work if I want, if I choose to. So and maybe do some things. I've later in life, since I've been divorced, I've really developed appreciation for travel. And so I want to do a lot more of that once this COVID is over. In fact, this working from home thing is something that I could probably at some point integrate into my travel. And I think it would be fun to go somewhere for a couple months and explore that and work from there and explore that and then come back to my home and then do that 2 or 3 times a year and explore certain areas of the world that I want to explore. There's so much out there that people haven't, that just don't see if they don't travel. Travel is just a very important thing. Now, if I get to the point where I feel that I have more than enough, I've talked about this with some of my siblings, but I think it would be fun or nice if I have excess to get to a point where I set up like a educational trust for my father's offspring, for my father's descendants. I have because of his IRS troubles, he wanted to work. He was struggling to make rent on his shop, and I ended up buying a shop that I have just let him use for costs for a long time. And unfortunately, he's still around using it, and I haven't benefited one bit from doing that, from buying that for him. I've only gotten my cost covered from that, and I hope he uses it for a long, long time. But when it comes to a point where it's mine, it means that I've lost him, and I'd rather have him in the shop by a long way. But when it comes to a point where I've lost him, if I benefit from that shop at all, I think some of the benefit of that would be an educational trust for his descendants. So that's something that I've been thinking about.
Jim, before we get into your future, Stu, I just want to ask, would you say that your daughter has taken up some of these lessons the same way that Jimmy has?
My daughter and my son are very, very, very different and very, very, very similar. It's really strange. My son has always been very frugal and has maybe passed up some life experiences and he knows that I've talked to him about this, that, there's some things that are worth spending money on, and life experiences are way more important than financial successes. And if you can have some good life experiences and with the people that you love and explore this wonderful world and this beautiful, huge world that we really only just know our little corner of it. And to go out and explore some of these beautiful areas, just amazing. My daughter has that. When I started traveling, she started traveling with me, and she and my son didn't want to, but she did. She at her young age in mid-20s, she's been to more places than I've been to. She's done a 3-week tour in Morocco, in Africa, with her educational program. She has a master's degree, and where my son went to a very affordable college, my daughter went the other way. She went and went to a fairly expensive private college, and she got a lot of grants and scholarships to go there, but it was substantially more expensive than what my son did. But during her education, she did, like I said, 3 to 4 weeks in Morocco, 3 to 4 weeks in Thailand on service learning programs. Her degree is public health, so there's a lot of opportunity for service across the world in that area. Besides Thailand and Morocco with education, she's been to Vietnam, Costa Rica, Hawaii, Alaska, Europe. And I'm probably missing some places. She's toured a lot of the United States as well, but she's got a different, her field does not pay the same as my son's field, but she thoroughly enjoys her work in public health, and she doesn't really care about the money as much as my son does, and about the savings as much. She still saves, and she still has, 401k. She still whatever, but she invested most of the inheritance that she got in her education, where my son saved most of it actually and had it after his education. But it just goes to show that there's a lot of path to get through this world, to get through this life of ours. There's no right or wrong way. There's your way, period. You should pursue your way and do what you need to do to make yourself happy and to have the experiences that you want.
Totally. So, Jimmy, where do you go from here? Are you trying to target a net worth or passive income goal down the road?
That is another good question. I am not really enjoying corporate life. IT is okay. There's a lot of headaches that come with it. It does seem kind of like a glamorous job, you could say. It's heavily in demand and it does pay well, but some of the projects and the deadlines and the unrealistic stuff you have to deal with is not very fun. Part of me wants to go back to sales or business development, or start my own business or something. I do have intentions to acquire a couple more rentals, and if they were paid off, they could cash flow my lifestyle, and I could be what you call cash flow financial independence, even if I don't have a large sum of money associated with that. But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I definitely intend to be a millionaire in the next 5 to 10 years, if not sooner. My wife's business has quite a bit of growth potential, or it could also provide our needs and allow me to go into some other interests. I do have more interests than I have time to explore in a lifetime, I think. I have a lot of interest in the trades, and, I don't really enjoy sitting around at a desk all day. I like to be active, and I would love to, this may seem odd, but I kind of have this dream of working part-time at Costco or Home Depot, just getting some health benefits and then I can do my own thing, 20 hours a week and work part-time 20 hours a week. But I do want to give back. I want to serve. I want to teach people what I've learned, that maybe they're not learning. And, part of me thinks about all these people in retail that have to work holidays and Black Friday, and they never get the holidays off. And, I guess I could be that person that works the holidays off, because if I wanted to, I could walk away at any point. So that's kind of where I see myself going, and just, kind of doing my own thing one day, and, having some little part-time backstop. Freelancing is another thing I've thought about doing if I get to a certain point where I could still use my technical IT skills on the projects that interest me, but it's just, kind of like a bonus where I don't necessarily need the money, but I can still not touch the principal and just cash flow my lifestyle and let my money grow.
Yeah, well, you're obviously doing super well, so congrats on that. And I think you've chosen a good career path, right? That's helped you to grow your income and get here as fast as you can, because you're just in your late 20s here. So you shared with us about $100,000 net worth at age 25 and about 250. You've hit over 250 now, right? Before the age of 30. So those are some of the benchmarks. I just want to go back, Jimmy, because I think you mentioned with the saving rate 40 to 50% and being able to grow this so quickly and grow your income so quickly. How did all this start? Where did your interest in money, in investing start? And as much as you want to share and are comfortable with, where did it all begin?
It did begin when I was 18 and my dad pushed me to get a Roth. And mostly I remember buying the ticker SPY, which was an S&P 500 index fund. But I was also encouraged to pick some individual stocks. And, that way I guess you could have more interest. An index on the outside is kind of boring, even though it's extremely effective for long-term purposes. And, that's what Warren Buffett recommends to most investors is just the S&P 500 index fund. But, I picked some 3D printing stocks because that seemed really interesting at the time. And some solar stocks, and those didn't do very well in most cases. I think they'll do better in the future, but so that's kind of where it started. In college, I would read Yahoo Finance for about 2 hours a day, and eventually I stumbled upon Mr. Money Mustache and Choose FI, and I got really into some of these financial independence podcasts and tax optimization, real estate, and just got more and more interested in everything with investing or how to make money.
Yeah. So as you look back on the short journey you've had now and all the things you've learned, are there a couple mistakes that you could point to and say, hey, I wish I would have done that or handled that a little bit differently?
Yeah, there's a few. Some of the mistakes that I've made is I bought probably too big of a house too early on. I bought a $300,000 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house, and we didn't even have kids at the time, so I don't know why we needed all those bedrooms. But at the same time now, it's in such a desirable location. We only owned it for 2 years. It went up $50,000 in price, and now even 4 years removed, it's over $400,000. So the thing is I relocated for a job out of that state, and I kind of had the option to keep that house as a rental, and I had some interest in that, but it wouldn't have cash flowed. I still wish I'd have kept it because I would have probably used it to get a HELOC, and that would have been able to, accelerate my foray into real estate. But also, when I owned that house for 2 years, just to give an idea, it was 2016 to 2018, I paid down the mortgage aggressively. In about 2 years, we paid down about $30,000. And both of those years, the stock market went up about 15 to 20%. And so, I was earning whatever my mortgage rate was compared to, I wish I had been maxing my 401k. So, I did my Roths, but I just did my 401k to the match, but I really wish I had put more money into the stock market back then. So those were some of my big mistakes. I wish I'd held on to that house.
You say big mistakes, but you're young, man. You got your whole life, right?
Yeah. In hindsight, I still have plenty of time. They're not anything that's really held me back, but I do think if I'd have held that house, I probably would have another 100,000 to my name, but that's how it goes.
No, it's interesting. And Jace, we did interview Jace, and we're all about the same age. So same thing, same concept. You had some mistakes as well. Stu, let me jump over to you. I want to talk about your real estate portfolio because you have quite the portfolio here, and we haven't hit on it. So you have, just in summary, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, you have a commercial building, a home, a single family home, 2 condos, and then a couple lots, right? And some of these numbers are pretty amazing. On these 2 condos, you say you bought them for about $66,000 and $75,000 each in 2011, and they're close to $300,000 now. So that's almost like 4x your money, right, on some of these.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. the thing is like I said, once we started, so I got the life insurance money and I used it pretty much to buy a house that was out of the neighborhood from where their mom was, and it was big enough to raise two kids, because the house I had was definitely not. It had just one bathroom and a toilet in the entry from the garage. And, the kids I'd get phone calls at work about fights over the bathroom every morning. So, we ended up buying a house. The house is on there with the life insurance money. That's what I did with it entirely. I put it on the house. And so, it did open up, and then I paid off some of the debt that I got stuck with in the divorce, and I paid off my car payments and stuff. So I got rid of all of my short-term debt with it. Then I went out and got a HELOC on it. And the HELOC, to me, the HELOC was the key. So now I have money available to buy something. And, in 2008, 2009, the real estate market crashed, and I went actively looking for real estate. And, I grew up in northern Utah. I'm a skier, and I looked at some properties around where I was living, but, and I also got looking at condos closer to the ski area where I like to ski, up at, Grand Target. And, there was a condominium development, where, well, it's close to Jackson Hole, and that's a national destinational ski area, and gateway into Yellowstone Park and Grand Teton National Park. And I found a condo up there for $75,000, and so I used my home equity line of credit. I bought it, and then took a HELOC on it to pay for it. So basically, my out-of-pocket investment for it was like $15,000, and then I took the HELOC on it, and then paid my house back, paid my home mortgage HELOC down. Anyway,
Interesting.
Just to give me seed money, just to give me money. The markets crashed, and Teton County, Wyoming, and Teton County, Idaho got hit hard, because that's where a lot of people have second homes. Like, you're going to do what you keep your first home, but you're not going to fight that hard for your second home. You're going to, if you need to lose something, that's what you're going to lose. And the real estate values just tanked in this area. So, but I was like, well, this is an investment, but I like to ski. so it was, and my payment was about what a car payment was on. So I could have gone and bought a car that's going to depreciate, or I buy a condo that has some upside.
Yeah.
A few months later, the one right next to it came up for sale for even less. And I had a good realtor that really liked to negotiate. She loved to negotiate. So I stick her on it. And I picked up another one for $66,000, later in the year, in 2011. And, I've had people tell me I was crazy for doing it. It was stupid. The real estate market sucks. Don't get into real estate. Everybody's losing their money. And I'm like, no, this is the time to buy. This is the time to buy. And if I can afford it for $300-400 a month, I have an asset. And to tell you the truth, I couldn't even rent them out for the first year or two. Like I didn't have the money to really even furnish them. I mean, they were bare bones furnished and anyway, but, as we know, here it is 9 years later. They've come back, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, with a vengeance. And, I'm very fortunate to have been in a position and to have taken the chance and to have done that, because they've been one of the biggest reasons in growing my net worth. That's substantial, 2 of them. And there was a third one that sold for $57,000. And I'm like, if I'd have known about it, I'd have tried to go after it as well.
You would have owned the whole complex, huh?
and I'm mad about it. So,
So the numbers on your real estate portfolio, you have about you mentioned about 1.25 million in value, about 400,000 in debt. So you're net about 800. How much in cash flow do you collect monthly from, I guess, those 4 rentals, right?
well, it's been kind of dynamic. I was renting out my main home for about 5 years, and I was getting about $1,500 a month for that. And then I rented out one of the condos for the last 7 years. And when that renter left in October, I was getting about $1,000, and it's worth about $1,500 a month in rent. But I'll tell you what, if you get a good renter in that pays on time and that takes care of your place, it's worth it to undervalue the rent. I will tell you that up front. A bad renter will cost you money. So with COVID, my renters have moved out of my house. I'm currently not renting anything, and this is why you need cash flow. This is why you cannot get in a cash crunch, is because you will have times when you have to pay for everything and you don't have income coming in. So currently, right now, what I am doing is I'm in the process of moving back to my main house, because to tell you the truth, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, and anybody that wants to rent it has a lot of kids, and it gets trashed. And I had a renter in there for 2 years, and they got trashed, and then I had another renter in there for 3 years, and it got trashed. So I'm just moving back to it right now. Since I can work from home, I'm moving back to it, and then I'm converting both of my condos into short-term rentals, because I think there's more income potential in short-term rentals as opposed to Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
Currently, I'm no income, but it has the potential. All 3 properties have the potential to rent out for $1,500 to $2,000 a month.
Awesome. Good for you. All right. Well, you guys have been gracious with your time. So let me just ask a couple more here and then we'll wrap up. Thanks for hanging with us. So let me just ask, we'll save general advice for a 30-year-old at the end, but let me ask you some rapid fire questions here. But first, I'm just curious on both of your risk tolerances. So maybe where are you at, 10 being willing to take the most risk and 1 being the most conservative? Where are you both at right now? Jimmy, let's start with you. Where are you both at right now, and how has that evolved?
For me, I would say I'm at a 7 or an 8 on the risk scale right now. It's gone down. You know, I've got young kids. I've got 2 mortgages. I need to rent out 1 condo, and I'm eating that condo. I'm paying that 2 mortgages right now. While I did a renovation on this primary home, so it's gone down. I definitely want to have a larger cash position. What I hear it called is the barbell, where you want to have a heavy cash position so that you can be aggressive with all the rest of your money. So, you know, I'm pretty aggressive. One of the funds that highlights that is the ARKK fund. It's an ETF that focuses on innovative companies, disruptors, huge upside potential, but also huge probably going out of business potential. But that thing is done really well over the last 4 years for me.
Awesome. Stu, what about you? Risk tolerance, has it changed over the years?
Maybe a little just recently, but not a lot. I've always been high risk with my investments. I'm not afraid of market fluctuations. I saw them in 87. I saw them in, I can't even remember what years they were, but I've seen enough of them that know that most market fluctuations in my lifetime recover very quickly. Now, if you look historically in my parents' lifetime, there was a 20-year bear market. But something changed somewhere in the 80s and 90s, and we've had bull market run for a long time. And I get a little concerned every once in a while, but to tell you the truth, because I've been so successful, I have enough that I don't think I need to be afraid to be aggressive as I get closer to retirement. Plus, I have the comfort, the fallback on of my career, you know. So that gives me some insurance. So I would say that I've always been like an 8 or a 9, and now I'm maybe a 7 or an 8.
Okay, so you guys are both still pretty up there, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's finish here with some rapid fire questions and then last words of advice. So, Stu, let's start with you, and then Jimmy, you just answer right after. What's the most expensive car? How much that you've purchased?
About 5 years ago, I bought a used Infiniti all-wheel drive sedan for about $25,000.
Okay, Jimmy.
I bought a certified used Toyota Corolla for $14,000 cash.
Okay, what about most expensive pair of shoes, Stu?
Probably under $100. Probably well under $100, actually.
Okay, Jimmy.
I've got several dress shoes and hiking boots that are high end, $200, but my everyday Nikes, I'll always buy them on a buy one get one free or half off, and so it's like 70, but with the BOGO I get 2, and so the average is to be about 50.
Okay, what about the most expensive meal that you guys have personally paid for, Stu? We'll start with you.
I was at a Super Bowl party here a few years ago and had known that I'd won a couple of squares on the football pool there and had about $1,000 coming to me from winning squares.
From Super Bowl squares?
Yeah. And
nice.
I ended up blowing probably about $400 or $500 that night paying for rent. Everybody's like, not everybody in the establishment, but definitely I paid for everybody at my table, all the meals, everything. It was probably a little over $400, maybe almost $500.
Okay, Jimmy.
And it was fun.
For me, probably $50. I always use coupons, and usually I'll make it up to full price anyway with the tip.
Right. And then last rapid fire question here. How much do you both spend a year annually? Do you know what your household spending is?
I do not keep track of my spending anymore. I do. I'm single. I like to go out with my friends. I like to have a good time socially. This year has been kind of rough on me, but I probably, and my son would just, and my dad too, would just roll his eyes at this. But in the last several years, it's not unusual for me to spend $1,000 at restaurants a month.
Okay, Jimmy.
Annually, somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000 a year is what I spend.
Okay, so let me just last question here. Let's talk about advice to a 30-year-old, and I know we've gotten into a lot of it already, but I think you've both shared some good information on the notes that you shared beforehand and what we've discussed. So, Jimmy, let's start with you this time. What would be your advice to somebody who's just getting started? Maybe they're out of college, 25 or 22 or even 30 years old. What would be your final words of advice to them?
Okay, I've got a few things I want to touch on briefly. Number one is if you get married, make sure you stay married. We've talked about it with my dad. Divorce is expensive. So work on your marriage and be transparent, be accountable to each other. Make sure you know kind of what you're getting into. The other thing would be to learn about hedonic adaptation, learn how it affects you and how it relates to finance, as far as upgrading your lifestyle or downgrading your lifestyle. If you're coming out of college, keep living that way. You don't have to buy everything new. There's tons of perfectly good used stuff people are getting rid of all the time. So yeah, I live as cheaply as I can. I'm always looking for a deal, but I do splurge on value when I see it. So those are my main things. Last thing I'll say is get term life insurance. For $500 a year, if I were to die, my wife would be essentially a millionaire, and vice versa, and we wouldn't have to worry. I just think it'd be horrible to be in that situation where you've lost a spouse, and if they're taking care of your kids or working and you depend on that income, what are you going to do? You're basically sentencing yourself to a lifetime of hardship. And so that's one of my main things. Get a will, get a healthcare proxy, and a power of attorney as well. So I know that was kind of a lot, but I'll leave it at that.
No, that's great. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Stu, last word to you.
Be diligent and take care of the important things like like my son mentioned, life insurance, long-term investing, long-term savings, investments in yourself and your education. But once those are on, you can set those up to be kind of on cruise control. And once they're taken care of, don't be afraid to live and enjoy life and to experience life and experience friends and travel and whatnot. I mean, it's very important to take care of the basics, but once the basics are taken care of, you're working to have a good life and to have a good experience, and don't forget to just enjoy the journey.
All right, awesome. Well, guys, this has been a real treat. So thank you. Thanks for staying up late with us, and thanks for taking your time. It's a little bit of a longer episode, but I think it's a treat. And Jace, it's been one that we haven't done before, right? With a father and a son. So
first time.
Yeah. So thank you to both. Stu, net worth of about 1.3, had about $100,000, under $100,000 at 42 to $1 million at 53, right?
Yeah.
And Jimmy, you're at about close to 300 around, give or take. So guys, thanks for coming on. That was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Clark Sheffield and Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website at millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.